vaccine opposition has actually skyrocketed during the pandemic because of the pandemic. So both sides have become more entrenched. There are new players in the anti-vax movement. There are new talking points. All the old players, all the old leaders are still there. They're still involved, but they're adding new ones. So you can see here, again, these are just mentions of vaccine hesitancy or vaccine opposition, really. Before the pandemic started, we had about 5,400 a day, and now we have 14,400 a day. So just an enormous spike in opposition to vaccines. Here's a different representation of the same data. You can see here just an incredibly huge spike has occurred really since the pandemic started. A further entrenchment, a further doubling down on really a belief system. Here you have what a lot of these messages are about. So you have COVID-19 is obviously a really popular topic of conversation, but vaccine ingredients are still a big deal. There's a war on Bill Gates by anti-vaxxers. He's become enemy number one. So a lot of the conversation is against Bill Gates in particular. He's become the face of vaccines. Discussion about mandatory vaccination. A lot of vitriol thrown at Dr. Fauci, still another face. And then that recent documentary that came out called Plandemic, that spiked the conversation as well. And I think you can see here, if I remove some of these topics, you can kind of get a relative sense of the increase over time. But you can see it's right there in the data. You have pre-pandemic and then during, and there's a really big change. Word clouds here. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an enormously influential figure in the anti-vax movement. He is one of the de facto leaders, and he uses his social media accounts to daily attack vaccines, as well as individuals who promote them. You can see here, these are the trending stories. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. comes up often, along with Andrew Wakefield, sort of the discredited British physician who wrote the original studies trying to link MMR vaccines to autism, which was debunked, and his medical license was taken away. But he's living in the U.S. now, and he's a really popular figure, and they're very large followings, and those followings are growing. Popular tweets in the moment, but I'm going to skip. So here's, again, just pre-pandemic on the left here and current situation here on the right. And I wanted to just give you some really quick data. Only about 50% of vaccine leadership carried over into the pandemic. So there's another 50% on top of that now that are new emerging leaders that have taken the crisis and are putting forward their own talking points, attacking vaccines. And if you look at those, who they are, about 30% of these new individuals are self-proclaimed doctors. And so we haven't verified whether they're actually doctors or not. They say that they're medical doctors. And a lot of their conversation is directly personally attacking Dr. Fauci. Then you have another 30% who are parents that are opposed to vaccines. So a lot of new individuals who are not part of the debate have jumped into it. And again, we don't know if they're really parents or not, but they're saying that that's their reason for concern. 10% are open conspiracy theorists. So most of what they say all day, every day are conspiracy theories. 10% are conservative activists. And then 10% are granola activists. So that's an interesting thing about this whole vaccine opposition movement is you really have individuals on both sides of the political spectrum who probably agree on nothing else in their life except for this topic. And then you have some smaller numbers. There's some elected officials who spread information and things like that. I know I'm coming up on time. I wanted to provide this to you. So much of this work is trying to look for signals. And so if you treat it like disease surveillance, there's a thing called sentinel surveillance, and that's where do I pay attention to the most because it shows me a signal of what probably is true elsewhere. So these are the Facebook pages that we pay attention to the most. These are anti-vaccination Facebook pages. There's hundreds on Facebook, but these are the ones, if you're trying to just get a real quick temperature check, what's coming, this is where we look to. And then there's things like this what I probably would term questionable news site. And the reason I'm showing this is what we have found is as social media companies are getting better at playing this game of whack-a-mole, of shutting down content that isn't scientifically accurate, anti-vaxxers are getting better at circumventing that. And the manner of circumventing is they're going to accounts that are harder for social media companies to shut down, so private Facebook groups or well-known figures who for political reasons it'd be very difficult to close their accounts, like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So there's been this consolidation of around these different media channels in response to Twitter shutting down Twitter accounts, Facebook shutting down Facebook accounts. They're going to safe places, these islands, and they all. What's interesting about this movement is they're very coordinated. So when this occurs, there's a call to go here. They all actually do go there, and that's where they start getting their information. So that we wanted to share that with you because it is a changing landscape. And I'll end here. Right now, there's a Health Freedom Summit. These are the most famous anti-vaxxers in the world, as well as some new individuals. It's a like every conference these days, it's a Zoom conference. You sign up, but there's MDs, nurses, political figures, parents, and they're all sharing true or questionably true or outright false information. But the whole thing is it's openly about anti-vaccine vaccines, and it's how to do grassroots advocacy, how to get bills passed, how to spread information, how to start a Facebook page. So this is not something that's going away. It's something that's increasing and getting much more sophisticated. And I would argue, as have many other individuals, if you're looking at this from a public health perspective, we are woefully unprepared for the opposition to vaccines.
Clearly, public health authorities, state and local, federal, have spent millions of dollars and years trying to persuade people that vaccines are safe and effective. Here we have a vaccine that hasn't even come out yet. Clearly, it's not working. So could you just say something about why are we losing? Why are the vaccine safety people losing so badly?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there's kind of a confluence of factors, but one of them is all of your we have allowed the education about vaccines and all of the information about vaccines to come from traditional public health authorities. That's the tradition in the United States. In public health, you're not trained to have an argument. You're not trained to have an opposition. You're not ready for it. You rely on a neutral telling of the evidence, and you hope and expect that the public will listen to you and trust what you're saying and make decisions based on that. That is not the world we live in anymore. And so this tradition of a unidirectional expression of science, I think, is an antiquated one, unfortunately. And that has come, so if you're putting a CDC official or a county health director or a scientist up against hundreds of Facebook pages and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals who have predetermined that they're not going to believe what you're saying, and you keep your tactics exactly the same, you just keep sharing your same three talking points that vaccines are safe and effective, you will lose because you're not playing the same game. Along with that has been, like I mentioned earlier, the fragmentation of the media landscape. So, in a public health organization, they have oftentimes one person who's gone through media training and is allowed to speak publicly about anything. Now you have one person's opinion matter as much on Facebook and on another social media account as a world-renowned expert in vaccines. They have the same weight. And so that's a huge challenge. And if you pair that with just growing discontent and frustration with science and with authority, with government, you pair all those things together, it's a perfect storm for where we are now. There's something that's called cause stacking that's going on right now, and all that means is you have the anti-vaccine group used to be driven by really concerned parents with legitimate concerns. They are still there, but now you have celebrities coming in addition. You have a very savvy use of social media. You have constantly shifting talking points. So whatever is going to stick with a particular group, they'll use it. Public health just uses the same talking point over and over and over again, no matter who you are. There's no tailoring involved. And so, yeah, I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. And 10 years ago, people were saying it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better.